Okay, so turns out Mr. Ratty Rasputin is actually going to be our second legendary lord for Kislev. He's not a hero, he's not an agent, he's going to have his own sub-faction to unify and control this icy realm, which leaves Tsar Boris, Baba Yaga, and the leader of their Winged Lancer contingents in the lurch for now. No idea what will happen in terms of DLC. They might even consider that Boris Boka is dead, like he is in the lore. So I don't know how that'll be handled, but considering 9 legendary lords are coming on launch day, that likely means 2 for Cathay, 2 for Kislev, 1 for each of the Dark Gods, and Be'lakor as the not-so-secret 9th. Kostaltyn is his name, and being the most influential religious figurehead in the Kingdom of the Bear is his game. He is the Supreme Patriarch of the Great Orthodoxy, roughly equivalent to the leader of the Cult of Sigmar, Grand Theogonist Volkmar the Grim. Now, this reference to the Great Orthodoxy is new in Kislevite lore, as is Kostaltyn himself. Neither have ever been discussed or fleshed out prior to their reveal yesterday, and in fact, Andy Hall, who I've had the pleasure of meeting personally, is the madman responsible for this zealot and essentially creating his lore from scratch. Kind of a weird info dump though, because there isn't really any info that came with him at all. Normally when a reveal like this happens, we get a full poster that shows off a few of their skills and gives us a general idea of what to expect when we pick them up in game, but nothing of the sort happened this time around. And I find it maybe a little bit strange to unveil such an important character and not give us at least a brief backstory and introduction. But thankfully, there are a few things we know for sure, and we can extrapolate quite a bit more info from that. He's the warrior pope of Kislev, really, the religious leader and figurehead of their church, which means the Great Orthodoxy is the catch-all name for Kislev's pantheon. We never had that word to describe it, but now we do. Selyak, Daz, Ursun, Tor, Oryanka, if G-Dub somehow reclaimed her rights, these are the gods he'll be representing in Warhammer 3. And as agnostic and atheistic realms are quite uncommon in Warhammer, considering there's living, breathing proof of the gods, and that their blessings are important if you want to, survive, then being the man that everyone turns to on questions of religion means you wield an immense amount of influence and power, and more than likely, you're imbued with at least a sliver of the power of the deities you represent. Looking at his model, we can see he's covered in bear motifs pretty much head to toe, likely representing his connection with Ursun, while the torch and brazier in his right hand lights up in the darkness and keeps the cold bite of winter at bay, which likely represents Daz, the god of fire and sun. He's got a Kinjal dagger in the Cossack style draped across his right hip, and a Korov in his left hand, which is a religious banner blessed with sacred litanies and scripture that's probably pretty damn effective at banishing demons, I would imagine. And there's also quite a bit of friction between him and the Ice Queen, which is not exactly surprising, I guess. It's not uncommon for the head of state and head of religion in a particular empire to not see eye to eye. It was a common theme during the Middle Ages and Renaissance periods with the Holy Roman Empire, the Anglican Church, and many other civilizations throughout history. People who want to accrue ultimate power generally don't like to share that power. And there's perhaps even more cause for concern when we consider how religion and ice magic intertwine in Kislev society. More on that in a little bit. But yeah, Kostaltyn and Katarin do not get along at all, apparently, and there's kind of an interesting dynamic here, because that duality that so often characterizes the first 2 lords for a faction will be noticeably different this time around. The first 2 lords revealed for any given faction almost always fall into the category of powerful mage and CQB blender. Kyrian and Teclis, Karl Franz and Gelt, Skrolk and Queek, Grimgor and Azhag, Krotgar and Mazdamundi. But in this case, I just can't see Kostaltyn as a high-tier melee combatant, for the same reason that Volkmar without his Volkswagen isn't really a threat. When you see him on foot, you just kinda smile and nod your head and say, yeah, okay, little buddy, that's cool. But I'm sure he'll be able to defend himself here and maybe smack chaff around, but he's a bit too wiry and small and Rasputin-esque to be laying the smackdown on entire hordes of cornate berserkers on foot. He will likely be a support lord, whispering prayers to each of Kislev's deities, with ward saves, group heals from Selyak, and chance to Ursun that increase leadership, melee attack, and charge bonus. Essentially, a patrician, or a patriarch rather, on steroids, and we already saw that in the Khorne vs. Kislev quest battle. He will almost certainly have some type of religious relic to ride into battle as well, in the same way that Plague Priests ride Pox Cauldrons and Volkmar rides his Pimpmobile. I would be shocked if he didn't have a powerful war-altered type mount. Now, to return to the point I made a couple minutes back, in the land of Kislev, religion is the province of men. Magic is the realm of women. That is how it's always been, that's how it always will be. And this element of Kislev lore gets pretty grimdark. The land of Kislev itself is imbued with the power of a spirit known as the Ancient Widow, who promised the original Khan Queen Mishka the Slaughterer great abilities if she would lead her people to this new realm and settle there. Ice mages learn to tap into this power of the land in winter, and since those times, they have used these powers to defend the realm. These magics may have once been warp-spawned. The spirit of the Ancient Widow may indeed have once been powered by the same magics that make demons possible, but ice spells don't carry the same inherent risks of chaotic corruption that using the 8 winds of magic do. Ice magic is a different type of magic altogether that calls on the land, not on the warp. Don't get me wrong, it can still be incredibly deadly to the wielder, and in fact, many ice witches lose control of their powers and freeze themselves solid or blow themselves up, but hey, at least they didn't grow 69 tentacles and turn themselves into Chaos Spawn. More's the pity. The issue here is that if you show any aptitude for magic as a male whatsoever, you'll be strapped to a chair and have a part of your soul, a part of your very essence ripped away, to prevent you from using it in the future. Sounds brutal, and it is, but over time, they found that males are much more likely than females to fall to chaos, and they don't want to take that chance. It's not that ice magic in and of itself will make you turn chaotic, it's that it's a pathway to abilities that some consider to be unnatural. It's a gateway drug, and as we've seen with Sienna Foiganasis and unsanctioned hedge wizards in general, that rush of magical energy and creating conflagrations with your mind can be very addictive. So a male mage may start out only using ice magic, but then they see a purple sun or golden hound obliterate regiments on the battlefield. They say, hey, that spell seems useful, I want to try that out. They start wielding multiple lores of magic, and pretty soon they have completely overwhelmed themselves. The more they use it and abuse it, especially in regards to wielding multiple lores of magic, the more likely a wizard is to fall to chaos and potentially cause serious harm to Kislev. So the Gospodars and Ungals nip that shit in the bud before it ever has the chance to happen. And it all stems from an ancient prophecy similar to what we saw from Malekith, what made him poop his pants, in that a male witch will one day taint the pristine flows of ice magic and ruin it forever. They don't want to take that chance, so they head off that prophecy by stripping any male of their magic permanently right from the word go. If you're an unsanctioned hedge wizard, they will track you down and straight up murder you. If you're a noble, you undergo a savage process of etheric gelding called pacification, a cutting away of the part of the soul capable of seeing and casting spells. As one might imagine, this often leaves a hollowed out husk of a man on the other end, forcing the victim to the doorsteps of insanity. So many Kislevite nobles smuggle their arcane sons to the Imperial Colleges of Magic to avoid this terrible fate, which might give us some insight on Kostaltyn and why exactly the two dislike each other so much. There is a very real possibility that Kostaltyn showed innate aptitude for magic at a young age, was stripped of these powers, and overcame this horrible fate through religion and service and belief in Ursun and the other gods of the Kislev pantheon. But this stripping, or this magical gelding, would have marked him, for sure, and it would very much explain his bedraggled appearance and fanatic tendencies, that turning into a zealot was the only way his mind could survive the terrible ordeal he went through. Now, this isn't to say that ice mages are bad. They are an essential component of Kislev's continued survival against chaos. It's just very similar to the way psychers and heretics are dealt with in the Imperium in Warhammer 40k. They do brutal, terrible things, but they have to ensure the survival of their people. With that said, the mages and witches under Tzarina Katarin very much do have ulterior motives, even beyond the defense of Kislev itself. Their most important duty isn't actually to defend the destruction of Kislev society. No, that's just kind of a means to an end. They exist, ice mages and ice witches exist, to protect the land of Kislev, from which they draw their power. Just like on Ulthuan and Albion, there are magical ley lines that connect the waystones and Ohm shards that dot the Oblast. If enough of these were to fall and become corrupted, demons could enter through these breaches and the magic of the Ancient Widow could become irreparably damaged. So they'll sacrifice a good bit to protect these nexus points from chaos. And much like the Lamians, because of these ulterior motives, they've infiltrated every element of their own society. They will marry influential figures, they will maneuver to secure positions of power within rich and noble households, they become wives and mistresses and do really whatever's required to ensure that when the time comes, when the chips are really down, the source of ice magic that powers all these mages will be defended before all else. It's a symbiotic relationship, of course. They're still invested in defending Kislev and her people. They're not faking that in any way, shape, or form, but they're still their own faction within a faction, as is the religious side of Kislev. And so you might understand why the dynamic between the Great Orthodoxy and the Ice Palace is kind of on shaky ground. So at the moment, I wouldn't say I'm crazy hype or anything about Kostaltyn, because we don't have a lot of concrete info about him, about his mounts, about his campaign playstyle, his start position, anything like that. I like the model, and there's a lot CA could do with him from a lore perspective, especially if they kind of dive into that whole backstory and maybe go for that magically gelded in his youth. He goes into religion to figure out what the hell is going on and give him a reason to hate ice magic. If they give a real reason for Katarin and Kostaltyn to dislike each other, I think that is probably the strongest one you could go for. That would give him an innate hatred for any kind of elemental powers of Kislev itself. So he wants to focus on the religious side, on the praying to Ursun, Daz, Tor, all those guys, but the actual ancient widow spirit and the magical elements of Kislev piss him off. I think that would be a really cool and interesting way to kind of have a bit of a power struggle between the two legendary lords. So hopefully we'll get more info on him soon. Hopefully the full Kislev roster reveal will come very soon, and I will see you all in the next video. Any Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.